I would actually like to start this discussion by sharing an interesting statistics, which came up while we were doing the research for the Fortune India SPJIMR white paper on enhancing women leadership in India Inc. And so it was actually quite appalling. Just 1.6% of the Fortune 500 companies have women leaders at the helm. In fact, surprisingly, it's a little better when it comes to our next 500 list, which is a list of emerging companies. There it was 5%. But if you look at the overall Fortune 1000 company universe, it's just 3.2% women who are there women in leadership roles. So when we kind of did a deep dive and tried to find out why, one of the major reasons was, of course, unconscious bias. So, questions like, will a woman be able to take up a leadership role? Is it fair to give her a leadership role? Is she fit enough to handle a P&L role? Because we saw a lot of companies doing a lot of work around diversity, getting women on leadership roles, but they were, parked either in HR or communications. Very few women leaders they were heading P&L roles. So, Marcella, since you are a global representative, I would like to start with you. And this is a challenge globally. So what really is your suggestion to kind of break these kind of unconscious biases? And if you've also faced any such biases, the audience would love to hear and how you have overcome them.
First of all, thank you very much for having me here tonight. It's a great honor. I think it exists, the unconscious bias everywhere. Europe, Latin America, US, India, China. I don't think there's a big difference. I think one of the big things I have promoted always is we should start by having the same number of CVs of men and women. It starts by that. Because if you get 8 CVs of a man, HR did the whole process. See, there's other women there. So the first rule that I applied for many years was, I want to see the same amount of men and women CVs. Then let's see who comes out at the end of the process. But it starts from that. It starts that, I only found 3 candidates. There are 3 men. Okay, look a little bit harder. Look a little bit further. So for me, I think one of the things to break this is we need to make a bigger effort to find the CVs. It starts from scratch. Otherwise, it's already too late. And as leaders, I always say that we need to always be trying to see who gets the best job. It's not about a man or a woman. And I think that one of the big things that I got always was, but can you travel as much as a man can travel? Do you have the freedom? Can you go out for dinners? Can you do the numbers? All this kind. And I said, yes, I can do it. Otherwise, I will not be offering myself to the job. So, and you will hear later, women, we need to believe we can do it. And in the interviews, I always tell women, you need to say, yes, I can do it. Because it starts from that angle. But also I think that men should also understand that it's not about personal life. If a woman wants to take a job, it's because they want to do it. Doesn't matter if you have kids, no kids, if you want to travel or not travel. That's personal. I always said in one interview, you will never ask a man that. Why do you ask a woman that? So the unconscious bias, number 1 is CVs should be same number of men and women, and the questions that you do to a man should be the same questions you do to a woman.
Thank you, Marcella. Coming to you, Daisy, I remember in one of our conversations we had, you talked about a woman leader in your organization her male boss kind of just decided that, she would want to be posted in a particular place, and you asked the male boss, when have you even asked the lady? And when the lady was actually asked, she was, she wanted a more challenging role. She did not want to take up that role. So it'll be interesting to hear from you. How do you kind of, as a male, as a woman CEO, how do you, try and break these kind of unconscious biases which the male leaders have invariably?
So it continues to happen. I think that conversation we had was many years ago.
Yeah.
And recently I was at another company's event talking to some women. And there was a a leader in the audience who happened to be a woman, who told me another experience, many years apart, but the same thing, right? She was called back from maternity leave to handle a crisis in the company. That was when her baby was barely 2 months old or less than 2 months old. When she rejoined work after her maternity period, more than 6 months later, and there was a very coveted leadership rotation in the HQ, her management decided that, because she has a young baby who's 7 months old, she would not want to do it without even asking her, and awarded it to somebody else. So this positive intentionality, which manifests itself in very negative ways for women, the one thing that men have to be, because they are the majority in the workforce, they have to be part of the program design. And so one of the things that, intentionality is a big part of it. Marcella talked about candidate slate. Have a diverse panel, mandatory, because that's in your control. Don't let anybody get hired till you at least have candidates on the pool who are women. Don't use the pipeline excuse. There are no women out there, so we cannot hire them. Right? That's on the one side, the intentionality of the company and the intentionality of the leaders who are hiring. But there's also got to be the intentionality of women. The social conditioning for most of us in this room is don't be too loud, don't be too assertive, don't be too bossy. So you've got to, those of us who are mothers should bring up girl children differently, but please also be conscious that this is playing in the workforce, in your teams and with the women around you. I always say for women, by women, because they should learn to represent themselves more and say, this is what I want, and this is what I want to do, and don't let anybody make assumptions on your behalf. So there's this intentionality on the part of the organization, structures, programs, etc. around it. But there's also got to be intentionality around women to break out of their own social conditioning sometimes, to voice and verbalize what they want. I'm in this role. Here are the next 3 roles I would like to go to when they open up. Here's the 3 other after that I'd like to go to. Are there any programs that will help me prepare for it? Ask me when the role opens up. When the role opens up, raise your hands and say, I want that job. So this is intentionality both ways. Very proud to say that at Cisco's 46% of our leadership team is women. So we are obviously not handling P&Ls. And there are many success stories. I'm saying Rekha, who is a very, very dear friend in the audience. There are many women in this room who have done it, who have done the P&L management jobs at highest levels. Whereas intentionality is something that men and women leaders in the business, boards, all of that have to take. And women also have to take possession of their careers and their life goals and their career goals.
Pavitra, coming to you, both Marcella and Daisy talked about intentionality. And I would like to share with you an anecdote. Again, while we were doing the research, there was this women leader from a real estate company, maybe a VP levels. She came and told me that more than often when she goes to the market for a sales pitch, people don't want to talk to her because she's a woman. They kind of ask her like, where's your, is somebody else coming with you? So they don't even want to talk about it with her. So again, your industry is quite male-dominated. You hardly see any women leaders. And you're one of the few, you and your sister are at the helm. So it'll be interesting to hear from you as to how, in a sector like real estate, how do you deal with it?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, definitely we are a minority, not just in our own company, but also in the industry at large. I think what we have had to deal with is also a lot of unconscious bias about second-generation women entering a business. Second-generation, anybody entering a business, even I held that opinion, was, I guess you couldn't find a job anywhere else, so you joined the family business. I was so worried that that would happen to me that I made sure that I was as qualified as possible to enter the business. It didn't matter what the business was in my mind at that point, very naive. But having joined the business without a technical engineering background, I felt that definitely there were times when I may not be taken seriously. And I felt the way to handle that kind of unconscious bias was to bring my own approach of how to do things to the table. So I may not know technicalities of civil engineering, but I know how to follow the money. I know how to tell if a business is doing good or bad, and I bring my own way of doing that. So I think that is built over time, and people need to see you demonstrate that you are bringing some value and not necessarily trying to be better than, say, specifically better than a man, but just bringing your own value to the table. That's really important. In terms of the unconscious bias, I feel for many people, it's just that they have not been maybe exposed to the same in their households, so then they don't know necessarily how to extrapolate that to the workplace. So I feel a lot of the conversation today just positions women against men. I feel the conversation should be more about being allies. This has to be an allyship, because beyond that, I don't see why would somebody, want to give up a natural advantage in a workforce to basically have a more competitive environment. I mean, that's the basic psychology of it. So I feel it has to be positioned more as, hey, this is better for everybody, better for everyone in the workplace, 100% better at home, if that is the decision for the woman of the house to also work outside the home, and go in that direction. I feel like even on Women's Day, Women's Month, whatever you want to say, like the conversation is so, it's always excluding men or making men feel like somehow they have created this problem on purpose. But it is years and years and decades of conditioning, and for whatever, for all of that, this is where we stand today. So we've got to, this is an old book, but the whole Sheryl Sandberg leaning in together, it has really got to be the way forward. So it's got to be, a mix of policy. It's got to be a mix of just being able to have a conversation and being able to have and create awareness. And for men to understand what it is like to be a senior woman leader and still carry like minimum 50 to 70% of the burden, sometimes 100% of the burden at home. It is just not the same at all. And let's leave out fair or unfair, but it is just not the same at all. So first of all, they just need to understand what that takes, because they may not be seeing that in their household. So what a man is seeing in his workplace may not be what he's seeing at home. So just the understanding itself, I think there's a huge gap on that front. So, and mindset is just that. It's all about understanding and exposure to other sets of circumstances. So I think the main thing is to have conversation and to have it in a free-flowing, open manner. The ideal situation is you have, if the management is predominantly male, if they are comfortable talking about it, that's fantastic. That's the best case scenario. But if you've got women, we have to speak up. We have to speak up. There's also this whole like, oh, it's Women's Day. I don't want to talk on Women's Day because that's such a, like typical thing to do on March 8th. But this is something I've realized over the years. Like you've got to be out there. You've got to talk about it. You've got to encourage conversation. And you've got to make it seem amazing that we are in this position. And hey, everybody can do it, you should want to do it, and hey, there's a way to get there. So I think all of those things will encourage and change the mindset, and hopefully one day it's not about women achievers, it's just in the whole sea of achievers, we're also there. Like, I feel like I will arrive when it's not you were in the top women leaders or just you were just in the top leaders. I'm waiting for that day too,
Thank you. Ritu, we've heard on many forums that there is a clear business case for diversity.
Of course.
So how does one bring about, how does one ensure that women actually make it to the top?
Sure. Very, very interesting suggestions already made. Maybe I'll share a personal experience. When I joined Allianz, I was so pleasantly surprised. And it's an international team. I lead Asia Pacific, 13 countries, 20 companies. 80% of my leaders were women. And I didn't create this team. I inherited it from a male leader. So I was very, very happy, impressed, and I wanted to spend time with this gentleman. And I asked him, how did you manage to do it? Again, investments is pretty male-dominated area. And across so many countries, how did you manage to have women leaders leading? And I think the tips I got were very simple. He said, I don't look at gender. So it's gender neutral as far as I'm concerned. So I think the neutrality itself makes it a level playing field, because that's where the corporate biases that you started the conversation with are shed. So you're not moving ahead with the bias. Second suggestion I heard was that, like you said, equal number of resumes, but why not interview the women first? So you have a job description, interview the women first. Do you find someone who's capable and fits the role? Just sequence them that way. And I think that itself starts addressing some of those biases, because the moment there's a conflict of having an equally good man and woman, the bias sets in, and there tends to be a preference, it seems, for men. But if you find the woman first, then you just go ahead. And third, I think, is retention and nurturing, so that the pipeline does not leak. And there, I think, besides all the interventions that the organization has, it helps to have role models. It helps that this team has so many women leaders. It gives the other women the confidence that they can be one too. And hence, we've become a talent pipeline for other geographies. And it is no limitation. I mean, there are women who choose not to move geographies. There are women who choose at sometimes not to take some roles. But there are as many number of men who make those choices as well. If you take the gender part of it out, then you're just saying a human being at that point in time prioritizes something else. And that doesn't mean they would not want to do that at another point in time. So for me, that has been a great learning experience and a great experience to lead so many women. On the other side, I also wanted to add, I was just last week coaching a group of women aspiring to be board members. I was very intrigued. So there was the profiles, and then we were told there'll be no pictures in the profile because some of them were shy to share that. And I changed my entire coaching platform. I was like, the aspirants who want to be on the board cannot be shy to put their picture out there. And building a personal brand is pretty important part of that journey. And like my colleagues was sharing, the onus is on us. I mean, the organization does have to create a conducive ecosystem. But if there's an ambition deficit, nobody can really push you. If you're shy of being out there and not wanting to put yourself out there, there's very little anyone else can do for us. So hence, building a personal brand, network, showing that you're comfortable with numbers, these are all the biases that I hear against women. And I think it's upon us to make sure that no one holds them against us.
Thank you. Coming to you, Vivek, I know you said you would contradict this topic of that there's a clear business case that in diversity. So it'll be interesting to hear from you. But before you begin, thank you for making it to this panel, because I really found it difficult to get male leaders join our panel. In fact, the next panel also is horribly homogeneous. There are only women leaders there.
Well, since you asked 28 and I'm the 29th person you asked, and I'm not a female woman leader, I'm suffering severe imposter syndrome. Severe. I thought long and hard about my role in this panel, and I thought I might confine my comments to those that perhaps it's easier for a male to make. Because going over, I think the points that have been made are absolutely spot on. So I'm going to try to focus on a few comments that perhaps aren't said often enough. Maybe a first few on biases. It's very difficult to recognize biases and check male privilege when you're holding a position of authority and you're talking about how gender equity is so important. And the reason is that gender equity, when it's described by the CEO or the chairman of a board, or the chairperson of a board, I should say, by the time you get to CEO -1, -2, that commitment is atrophied massively. And I will reserve my comments, by the way, to male-run organizations. All of you have obviously, by virtue of the fact that you run the organizations that you're part of, those organizations already benefit significantly from a more feminized work environment. And that counts for a lot. You know, how often do CEOs ask, or does HR ask, when we are evaluating someone for a managerial role, how inclusive are they? what are they going to be like? Will they actually support diversity and inclusion in our organization? Or will we hold their advancement back because they're unlikely to? We don't ask that question often enough. Then there are mindsets. There are mindsets, and some of the, we were doing a survey and I got into a conversation with some managers and I looked at a few managers that had a specific record of advancing men over women consistently. So I really got into it. I said, what's going on? They said, well, at the end it came down to the mindset that said, he needed it more than she did. She's married. For her, it would be extra income. We can pretend to be shocked by that statement, but I'll tell you, it is out there and prevalent. You need to recognize people who think that way and think about whether you can re-apprentice them or not advance them, because it becomes quite toxic. You actually can't fix that once you advance them. Similarly, another one that we heard from men and women is children of women who work suffer. And these echoes came back from women who had left the workplace. They came back from men who had wives at home. And so what I'd say is that the workplace, we can't have women becoming men, but the workplace is not sufficiently feminized so that women's lived experiences are felt. Because the workplace lived experience is men with wives and caretakers at home. That is the lived experience. And until we actually address that, and by the way, it makes a huge difference to have all of you here, because the lived experiences, even something as simple as how many men are really comfortable with women bosses? We've stopped asking that question on survey and we start asking them in interviews. Not easy. Anyway, I don't want to take too much time, but I think these mindsets make a big difference. If there was something I would love to see done, we celebrate leaders, VPs, CEOs who deliver incredible returns on capital, deliver incredible financial performance, incredible shareholder returns, all of it. And the boards put those measures in. But how many CEOs are actually willing to be held accountable on gender equity, right? Or just inclusion. Until that's not a topic at the board, and no matter how many women we bring to the board, it seems to not be a topic at the board. I think there's no question it can be addressed. The issue is there's really not enough will.
Thank you. Marcella, coming back to you, what really is your thoughts to what Vivek said now? Do you often kind of come across men who don't want to work with a woman leader? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, I think it's real. But I mean, that type of comments, men do it. And women also sometimes feel uncomfortable, or inside our heads we are thinking about it. And I think what we are trying to say is, the first thing is we need to believe we can do it. And those comments, they will always be there. There will be always comments also of men and women. I always have said to people is, we need to learn to live in a world that is mixed. It's not about women and it's not about men. I think it's very rightfully said everything in this table. If you go to a dinner and there's 6 men and 1 woman, I had that. Normally the conversation will be about cricket, football, or anything. I have 2 options. Either I learn, I stay, enjoy the dinner, or I leave. I decide to be part of it. I decide to take the job. I should also integrate. But now let's put it reverse. Now there's also dinners where there's 6 women and 1 man. The conversation will not be about cricket or football. Maybe the conversation will be about something else, about the latest book we saw, the film, or even the spa. I don't mind. If that man has 2 options, either integrates or leaves. So we need to consider that it's not that suddenly 6 men needs to change the conversation for 1 woman, or 6 women needs to change the conversation for 1 man. Slowly, we need to understand that conversation needs to be everywhere and everybody needs to get into it. The men are gonna be there always. it is a facing situation. 80, 100 years ago, it was more men working than women. So of course, they had already enough experience to get a position of a CEO. A position of a CEO requires at least 15 to 20 years of working career. Let's put it 15. But if 15 years ago there was only 5 women and 200 men, of course the percentage to get to women, so that's why we need to start promoting that. But I always tell my team, guys, you need to start promoting women as well. Because everybody says, oh, women are great for startup positions. That's wrong. That's totally wrong. Yeah, because they want to have more time for the kids. Because, you know, they were not able to travel. That is already the wrong mindset of men, but it's also the wrong mindset of women. We need to change that mindset. We cannot think about that. And we just need to make that effort of interviewing. I love the idea of maybe interviewing first the women. You know, it's about the CVs, but it's about what the women brings to the table and what men brings to the table. Because I always have said the first step to be included is to make sure that the men are not excluded. We need to live in an organization where the input of the men is as important as the input of a woman.
Very insightful, thank you. So, I mean, we all actually, if you look at, you know, the Indian landscape, we realize that 30 to 40% of women actually exit the workforce in the middle management. By the time they reach the middle management, they are in their early 30s, they get married, they have children, and many of them find it difficult to get back to the workforce because due to lack of proper infrastructure facilities. And also, you know, some of the smaller employers, smaller companies don't want to hire women in middle management roles because they know that, you know, there's a 6-month maternity leave that could be in the offing. And there are some organizations which say they cannot afford it. So actually the problem is the leaky pipeline, the broken rung in the middle order. You know, women don't go, we talk about glass ceiling, but women don't go to the top to break the glass ceiling. The pipeline leaks in the middle rung itself. So Daisy, it'll be interesting to hear from you as to what can be done to kind of repair this leaky pipeline. What would be your advice?
So I think flexibility is one answer, which companies have to code into policy, right? Young mothers who have to make that balance happen between a child who is definitely at that point in their life their number one priority. You have to make, you have to be able to give them the flexibility if they want to continue to work, how they want to manage their work and there is this thinking that if we do flexibility, then somehow they'll stop delivering on their objectives. I have not seen women who balance both motherhood and career do that, right? Because they understand. They've been working for many years or a few years before they decide to become a parent. The second thing is there are resource groups that you can set up. Facilities, like you said, resource groups. So yes, childcare facilities, etc. on one side, but also parent caretaker networks on the other side. So you create support groups at work to be able to pick up a child from the same creche or drop the child at school. You know, there are, and I'm talking from lived experiences at Cisco in our campus in Bangalore. The third, it is a woman's choice. There is a higher order conversation about humankind's existence around motherhood, right, at this point. So let's say a woman decides that it's my choice to step out of the workforce. It is her choice to step out of the workforce. What we can do as companies and as leaders is to make sure we track these very smart, bright women who drop off for that life event, but also to be very cognizant of the fact that that life event is not like a permanent state of affairs. They do get to a degree of balance where they want to come back and to track them. And I found one thing here, same thing, right? They may have had a great career, and this is again a Cisco experience. They've had great relationships with their leaders, but when they went away from the workforce, they were hesitant about calling those leaders who were still in their business or their friends who had still continued their career to say, you know what, my child is now 2 years old and going to daycare and I can come back to work. They were hesitant about how they would be perceived by the same company where they had great relationships. And so And this was our finding in our first Back to Business program. We asked the women, why didn't you not just tell us? We called you, and then you're saying, yeah, we'll be happy to come back. Why didn't you call us when you were ready? Now we don't have that problem. We're running that Back to Business program. We have many poster children of that program who go out and tell other women, come back, and keep referring them to roles and so on. But there is also this extra effort, and when they do come back, you know, in the field of tech and in most businesses, you can be a little bit outdated and rusty on your skills. So you've got to have this, again, support network where you have a finishing school for 3 months, 6 months, you have strong mentors in their day jobs, leaders who are watching them to make sure they land correctly. There's a period of that readjustment. But believe me, the motivation and the performance and the loyalty also is way off the charts when that happens, right? So it's a lot of things are structurally can be done. I don't think we should just be whining about the leaky pipeline. We've got to find a way to bring women back to work. If they do choose to exit for a couple of years, and motherhood is just one event. As aging parents, we see women in their 40s or even men in their 40s deciding to take sabbaticals or drop off the workforce. So back to business. And getting great talent back should be a programmatic effort. And just, I think the dividend and the yield is very high in that process.
Talking about flexibility, you know, one thing which came out very, in our research, one thing came out, you know, very strongly was a lot of the younger women leaders we spoke to, they said that they don't want work from home. They said work from home, you know, if it's complete 365 days of work from home, it secludes us. And there's no way, as it is, we are judged because we are mothers or we are taking care of, we have the responsibility of taking care of our elderly, or it's the child who's writing the board exams, and that's when you know, many working women want to take a break. So they said if we are given a role wherein we'll have to work 24/7 at home, that'll make us more secluded. So what do you think, Pavitra, is work from home really a solution to build a diverse workforce?
I mean, two things there. One is, and this may be controversial in its own right, but I feel if you have top talent, they're not going to want to work from home. The top talent in any company understands that you need visibility, you need flexibility, but if it's about 24/7 working from home or whatever, 5 days a week or whatever, that's not your top talent in your company. They're not actually that engaged. They don't see the value of interpersonal or being physically in the same room and working things out. So setting that aside itself, I feel there is also this self-selection. Women who want to be in the workplace, they are already the top performers. They are already overcoming whatever they need to overcome at work or at home or society or all of the mindset bias that you've already talked about, to be over there. So they are certainly not going to want to be sitting at home and working away, unless it's just a job that's kind of something they're clocking in and phoning it in. I know when my office came back to work from office, and as a real estate company, what can you actually do working at home? Like, you have to be out there at sites monitoring construction, you have to be there on the weekends to monitor your sales and so on. So I was so thrilled to actually get back to the office, because it was insanity being at home and being expected to run a company and still, I don't know, answer the doorbell for somebody who's showing up in the middle of the day. It was impossible. So I feel women, if you want to, women or men, anybody, you want to do a good job, you're not going to want to sit at home, first of all. Second, that said, I feel work from home should be an option, because you're just increasing your catchment area of women. Who may, if they felt that was the reason why they couldn't enter the workforce, then remove that barrier for them. Remove it so that that's not a reason or a thought process or maybe just an element of the decision why they can't work. Give them the flexibility so that they can, if they need to, if your business model allows for it, right? And again, nobody's trying to force women join a construction company, because again, it's up to you. It's up to you if you want to be part of that. It's up to you if you want to be part of a company that does or does not support women. It's an individual choice. So I think from the work from home perspective, why not? Like, let everybody have the chance to work from home if they want to. Eventually, the top talent of people who may want to work from home may decide, hey, I'd rather be in the office because that gives me a lot more visibility and I prefer to do this job that way. And then they will end up, advancing within the company and so on. So I think work from home, if it helps increase your catchment, then it should 100% be something that is a policy or women are open to doing.
Ritu, does work from home really help in, repairing a leaky pipeline in the middle?
Let me link it with a question I ask most of the women I mentor in my organization or outside. The most asked question is often, can you have it all? I get asked that so often. And usually I answer that back with a question, do you want it all? Because it is a choice one needs to make. And it is a lot of effort. And in the process, when you want it all, I see many women trying to be a superwoman, excelling in all fronts, and being a super person always leads to burnouts. Now, does work from home step in to resolve that? Yes and no. The flexibility, as was mentioned, is welcome. But the visibility, the presence, the network, which intrinsically research says women are not the strongest at, gets even weaker. Women are not, the research says, I find it very difficult and I keep reminding myself it is fact, are not putting themselves out there, are not meeting enough people, are not networking, and work from home then further perpetuates that problem. So yes, the flexibility is most needed by all human beings at different points in time, career, family, and hence it's a great change that we see in work environment, but it's not a solution. It could end up being a problem as well.
Vivek, again, one of the insights that our research threw up was, rechristening maternity leave as parental leave. So, a lot of organizations like, I think, like HUL, DIGO, Fidelity, there are examples of a lot of organizations which are already doing it. Like they have something called the enhanced parental leave. And this is something which is like made it to the government policies in countries like Sweden. So do you think that would kind of increase the onus of the father also to be an equal partner? And will that help, in women getting back to the workforce faster?
It's a good question. I'm going to answer that in a slightly, maybe counterintuitive way. In 2020, another economist and I wrote an article about, we predicted that women would not come back into the workforce, many, post-pandemic. So we wrote an article called Open with Care. These policies are good. The reality is, to the point that was made, it's not whether you want to have it all. The fact is, no one can do it all. Men can't do it all. Women can't do it all. So unless we have a care economy that is well structured and organizations that have care that's considered strong care, the kind of care where children can come and they feel good about having their kids spend time there, they're more likely to succeed. The reality is that, trying to do I don't think people will argue with a simple idea. If men had to take on all the care duties that women do, the workplace would change pretty fast. If men took on all the elderly care, child care, home management responsibilities that women do, the workplace would change pretty fast. And if you believe that, then you also have to believe that if you dig deeper, we found that the presence of policies, so we surveyed 200 companies and we tried to correlate policies with outcomes on gender equity, and there was no relationship for the top 20%. There was a mild relationship with the bottom 20%. The lack of policies meant there was a lack of gender equity. And the organizations in the top 20%, many of them had no policies whatsoever. Now, this is not an argument against policy, but let me tell you what happened. We asked women in those organizations why they do so well. They said three things. One, we feel like we can talk about our families and our kids and not be penalized, or there's no stigma attached to it in our work. And a lot of other places said, we can't do that. I would not even put pictures of my kids or dare to. And second, if I have to get back home to pick up a kid, if I have to do something else at the school, if I've got to be, either my spouse is helping me or it's not awkward, it's not considered a penalty. The third thing many of them said, and this resonated a lot with most of us, was, let's face it, without financial independence, there can't be equality. Without financial independence, we can argue for equality all we want. And I'm not trying to make the argument for equal pay. That, of course, needs to be done. But expecting that women will have the ability to push through without financial independence and therefore make the choices that many men make today is actually a tough putt. So I would make the argument that financial independence is such a critical role, and the women in the organizations that we spoke to said they felt financially empowered to make decisions about their own careers that other women in other institutions did not. So let me stop there.
Yeah, I was coming to you, Daisy. How would gender pay parity kind of help having more women leaders in the workforce or more women in the workforce? And how does one get to it? Because as of now, we are far behind when it comes to gender pay parity.
The point I was wanting to add to what he said is economic emancipation is very important. At Cisco, we run a program called JUMP, and it's a program where we bring young women who are in the workforce, and they have an eye on leadership, and we want, they nominate themselves, and they are high potential leaders, so they get nominated by their leaders, they go through a learning program, and the final module of that conversation is that you can get a bunch of women leaders in the business at Cisco come in and they can shoot any questions to them, which is still bothering them after that 6 months of active learning. And you're talking about Bangalore, this is the Silicon Valley of India. You're talking about a group of women who've gone mostly to engineering school, in their 20s to late 20s to early 30s, drawing a pretty good pay package. So economically independent, well-educated, economically independent, but whose money has to be handed over on it's a joint, the salary is being credited into an account where the husband, the father-in-law, mother-in-law, father are controlling the money. So will economic emancipation alone solve for this problem? Or is it that plus breaking the social shackles that do it? I'm just telling you, and we are as equal as it comes, right? We are as equal as it comes. 46% of our realty are women. I'm a P&L managing site leader. There's no dearth of anything. But agency, I keep harping on agency because agency is something that nobody can do for you. Right?
Well, I think it's a necessary condition, but not sufficient. Yeah.
Marcella, it'll be interesting to get your take.
Okay, I think it's decisions in life. Let's be honest. We talk about gender, but it's also about a dream or a decision in life. You need to educate the kids from a very early stage that equality exists. There are decisions that you made. If you're single, you're independent. But if you are married, you also need to discuss how are the things going to be at home. I can tell you I have an incredible marriage. I'm super independent, but we make decisions together on how we are going to do this as a couple. And I think it's very important, but they need to start, it starts from going to school about how that independence is going to be between men and women. And I think that, yes, there's going to be a lot of decisions, okay, who does what and this does what? Yes, but I really believe that it's a decision in life. I also decided maybe not to go to a lot of birthdays because I needed to travel. I also decided to marry a guy that will support me and allowed me to travel and not be with me for a week. You know, there are decisions that, now, if I was expecting to get my kids every day 20 hours, maybe I cannot choose this job. But that's a decision I need to have the freedom to decide. I think it starts from there. It starts by having the freedom and educating the new generations that there can be equality, that the independence of finance, the independence of decision, it's there, that the flexibility is there as a tool. I think everything we have said, we all feel it, because I agree, if you want to be a top person, you will be the first one in the row. You cannot be the top just being behind, but you need to have the opportunity to choose what you want. I think for me that's very important to say. Independence is great, independence of decision, independence of choosing. Everything in our lives, despite this conversation, requires to give up something else. If you want to have an incredible body, maybe you need to go to the gym 4 hours. You know, if you want to really be able to travel, you need to save money. If you want to become a singer, maybe you need to go and train your voice. I'm just saying everything that you choose in life requires something. And to be a women leader and to be a women CEO or executive or board member will also require something. And that are decisions that we all need to make. Nobody can make it for us. That's the only thing I want to say about freedom and about women is nobody should decide for us, but we need to make that decisions.
Pavitra, you touched upon sponsorship and allyship. If you could just elaborate on that, like what really do you mean by sponsorship and allyship, and how can that be done?
So a couple of years back, my sister and I decided we were tired of your typical Women's Day events. We would ask the women, what do you want to do on Women's Day? And they'd say, call someone to teach us some recipes. And I was just shocked. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, why is this what you want to have a conversation about? You have 2 women leaders in a very, male-dominated industry, and is that all you want to do? And you know what? To some point, the sponsorship was, no, you can't have that. I'm going to call someone who's going to talk about financial independence and learning about money management and educating financially for women. And now every year, this is what we do. And it's a very successful program. The women love it because they're like, hey, I'm investing. To the other point about do they even have freedom to choose what they can do with their money? A lot of it is you don't know what to do, so let's take this money and then we will invest. Your dad will do it, or your brother, or your husband, or whoever. Now, if women are just as educated about that aspect about money, then hey, that's just as great. Now, you have a voice about that. You can have a conversation about that. And by the way, financial returns are very easy to track, whether your husband invested it or you invested it, and it's quite easy to see where the returns are coming from. So to sum up the sponsorship, yes, it's got to be inclusive. You've got to hear what women want, but also to some extent, maybe sort of just say, no, this is how we're going to do it. Fair and, getting the voice from the bottom up is great. But there are some things that we just know we have to push down. So some of those have to happen. The other thing is making men part of the conversation. So we also started to have these discussions on bringing men into the conversation as well. Women's Day event was never with the men. It was always women on our own. And then the men would be like, what are you guys talking about? Like, what do you guys talk about in that room? And we said, hey, next time you be part of that discussion. And it was more of a free-flowing discussion, asking, why do you think women can't be at the project site more? And the men were just sort of like, we're so worried for safety. We're so worried about access to clean bathrooms. And my point was just sort of like, well, don't worry about that. Let's just create the environment. And don't make the decision for women again. Why aren't you staffing women at project sites? There are so many women in our firm that don't want to be doing contracts or procurement or whatever. They're like, I want to be out there at site. But somehow there is like this fear of something happening and the well-intentioned sort of protection, which the men needed to hear, you don't need to do that. Safety is like a basic hygiene in our organization. You cannot not have that. So we just had to let a lot of other people know that, hey, you don't need to make these exceptions. You don't need to make perceived, good intentions for the safety of others, etc., which wasn't necessarily top on their minds because they knew the company would be looking after that anyway. So that was a big learning, and I think having those conversations more and more will help. I think also some of the unconscious bias tends to come not just what women can do, but what can men not do. Like this idea that, hey, paternity leave, why aren't guys, expected to just not be in the office, like the weeks or months after their child is born, for example. Like that's also an unconscious bias against men. And maybe men also feel like they can't take that time off because it's perceived a certain way. So a lot of that is just having conversation and being open about it. And I think having the freedom to talk and discuss and even understand what people's values are is really important, because every organization is different. There's some things that are very easy to talk about in some companies and in some where it's not. So understanding what it is in your organization that seems taboo or needs to be broken down is the first thing that you have to address and talk about.
Coming to you, Vivek, how does one promote sponsorship and allyship in an organization?
That's a good question. We've spent a lot of time internally. So I'll speak from lived experience internally at McKinsey as opposed to looking outside. So anecdotally, I had taken on a role where I was responsible for women's advancement inside the firm. There were 3 or 4 things we had to do differently. So first, we had this huge issue, and I looked at it across Asia, but this is India specific. Our recruiting pools were completely male-dominated. IIT, IIM, no matter where we went. So we had to say, you know what? We're pulling back from IIM, we're pulling back from ISB, we're pulling back from IIT, we're moving to SRCC, Stephens, National Law School, Lady Shri Ram. And there was a lot of resistance to it. So the first is we had to open the recruiting pools. Second, where I was unsuccessful, was to take all names off of resumes. The way we process is we first get 50-50 in, and then for the interview, we take the name, for the screeners, we took the names off the resumes. Anyway, was not successful there. There was a lot of pushback. No, we need a name. You don't really recruit a name. All sorts of biases in there, but couldn't fight that one. Then we assigned senior partner sponsors, not mentor sponsors. And the big difference is a sponsor's job is to make you successful. A mentor's job is to give you advice. We figured out pretty quickly, forget the mentorship, forget the gyan. Either you're going to make them successful or you're not. Interestingly, what we found was 60% of our senior partners took it seriously and 40% did not. Okay, so then in the next iteration, 6 months later, we asked the women to choose sponsors. They reallocated themselves. Then we held an event where we asked only women, it was a women event, and they got to invite men that they felt were sponsors. What do you think happened at that event? All the men that were invited were suddenly seen in a very different light by the institution than all the men that weren't. It was a little bit of social pressure, but it worked. So now I'm not getting to, to answer your question, and your question specifically was not leaky pipeline, but allyship, yeah. We pushed sponsorship, right? And so it wasn't just an open door to come and have a chat. Oh, I remember one anecdote. There was one person who told one of our women, it went down in history as the worst conversation ever. They actually said, you know what, it's tough to have it all. My wife used to work at McKinsey, and she decided to quit the workforce, and I'm in it now. She came back to us totally horrified. And the fact that this can happen in our institution, where we believe people are progressive, they've been imbued with this idea that, of course, they've been trained on this, it can happen anywhere. So I think that the quick point is you have to lift as you climb. And we took a mindset in our reviews that we would try to not let any women leave out of a sense of a lack of belonging. You can leave for many reasons, but if you leave for a sense of lack of belonging, and so now the last thing I'll mention is every team, every month, there's a survey. It's simple. There are only 5 questions. Everyone fills it out. One of the questions is your team inclusive? If even one person on any team scores below a 4 on a 5, below a 4, the senior partner of that team gets a message. We don't know who it is. We can't know who it is. It's a blind survey. But somebody is telling you, whether it's an LGBTQIA person, whether it's a woman, whether it's someone who just felt excluded, that they're not feeling included in the way you're operating. So, I mean, I do want to make a quick plug, if you don't mind. You know, as someone mentioned with CII, we're also working with the Gates Foundation, and we are running a survey that is free of charge for any institution that has more than 50 people. You'll get this is, by the way, is trying to get to root causes. Your data is your data, it's private. We will never divulge your data, and after the data is with us, it comes back to you. Anyone who wants to participate in that, you'll get an individualized report for your institution on where you stand relative to other institutions, size, sector, and within the India context. So if anyone wants to sign up for that, please catch me afterwards.
Ritu, again, would a fair bit of reporting, diversity reporting, like listed companies, it is compulsory for them to, report their diversity numbers. Unlisted companies don't bother to do it. And if you look at MSMEs and, the smaller companies, nobody bothers to do it. Would mandatory, making reportage mandatory, would that help in, getting more women into the workforce, getting more women into the leadership roles, not just reporting the diversity ratio, but also going into micro granular details in terms of gender pay parity, how many women have come back to the workforce after maternity, those kind of figures, would it really kind of help the cause?
I strongly believe accountability and transparency definitely help every cause. When you're made to make a public commitment and you're being accountable for it, being measured for it, tracked against it, quarter on quarter, month on month, year on year, it makes a significant difference. And I've seen that at Allianz. 5 years back, they made very public a statement and have been held to accountability on gender, for example. From a 10% gender diversity on boards across 70 countries, they said we'll move to 40% across all those countries that we have. And from there, each business, each country is being monitored. And it makes a lot of difference, small or big. And same for MSME and others. I think even when the women board directors were introduced, and now there's a lot of disclosure that SEBI requires of companies in India, there is attraction. It starts with family and friends. It starts with aunts and cousins. But then the more the number of women we see out there, the more role models, you also see others aspiring and moving in the directions. So it may start, which may not seem the most perfect solution, but it's a beginning. So accounting and accountability definitely makes a big difference. I see my friends nodding vehemently.
So Marcella, I think Japan has this thing called irubechi, wherein, it's you kind of, you have to mandate how many women, what the kind of diversity percentage you have. And if you have the required number of, the required percentage of diversity, apparently you get a certificate, and, which you can use for your promotion, which also gives you advantage in terms of sourcing and things like that. So do you, what kind of, policy changes would actually help in increasing women participation in the workforce?
Okay, in Europe it's already mandate to report. We have what we call the non-financial reporting. So we need to report by level, not only for the company, for each of the clusters in an organization, how many men and women you have. That's great because you also can identify if you are building enough for the future. I think one of the big things is, again, we go back, we need to hire people, but we also need to give the trust. We need to give them trainings about interesting things. I think reporting and mandates are good, but we just need to be careful that suddenly it's not a mandate damaging also the growth of a team or the expertise in a team. I always feel that we want, in the US, when I worked in the US, those quotas was killing me. Because only I needed to hire a person and they say, oh, it needs to be this gender, this religion, this color, this. And I said, my God, it became like a puzzle, you know? I have a 10 people's team, really. The US went one step too far. Okay, and I need to have in 10 people, one that is this, one that is that, one is that. Then at the end, you're thinking, okay, are we doing the United Nations or I'm doing a team? So I think we need to have that balance. I think it's very important that we push equality. I think that leaders that are not seeking for that will not survive. I really believe that it's CEOs, directors, managers that are not pushing diversity and inclusion will not survive in the next 5 years. Why? Because there's a lot of women there and there's a lot of men. And men loves to work with women and women loves to work with men. I see that every time that we have an idea and I mix the team, the ideas are much stronger than if it's only women or only men. So I think it's very important that we mandate in projects to have dual genders. You know, that if we have an incredible organization from something, we should have that. I have already even assistants, you know, PAs that are not women, that are men, and they love that job. And they bring a lot of other skills. So for me, I will tell you that the mandate that I will put first is any manager that is not supporting diversity, I think in the next 5 years will not survive. It will not grow. I think that's the first thing. And the team should also push that. I don't think it's only from top to bottom. I think the bottom should also push that and say, hey, I feel my team is not diverse. I think and not only in gender, as I said, culture, nationalities, religion, it goes beyond that.
My last question before I open this thing, we end, is women on boards. Again, it is mandatory in India to have at least one woman on the board. Would like a 50% representation on boards kind of, you know, create that, you know, agenda within the company? You know, would that help in bringing in? If I mean, would that set the tone to, you know, hire more women? Daisy.
So I think just that signaling is important. I don't say no. But I think from a board standpoint, it's also important that the women on the board treat this as much an important topic of discussion in the board. Then yes, you know, yes, there is the regulatory aspect of it in India and many other places, but the women on the board also should, and they will. I hope they will. Speaking as a board member myself, I hope they will ask those questions about why is your leadership team entirely men? The next rung is also entirely men. You know, ask. All it takes is sometimes a provocative question. That's it. You know, it can be tongue-in-cheek, it can be provocative, but that's all it takes. Sometimes people have just accepted a way of working and a way of thinking forever. Right? Our CEO says that all it takes, unless somebody is highly dogmatic, what they need is exposure. Right? So by your presence on a board, if you are showing all the other men on the board how well you serve that seat that you have on the board, and then you ask this probing or nudging question saying, why don't you have more women? How can I help you with it? Can I mentor some of your mid-level women to move into leadership? Can I help with this? Right? So just doing a little bit more than what is your day job on the board. I mean, treating this as a day job on the board. Rather than saying, I've been called, I'm on the audit committee, my job is only to sign off on the financial audit. But to, you know, offer, not just make a comment, but also offer assistance. Can I send 3 people your way? Can I send 3 smart women your way? Right? Doing these types of things will help. But if we just go there to sign off on all the papers that are put in front of us, maybe not.
Thank you so much. I think it's time for our next conversation to begin. So thank you so much for being part of this discussion. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our audience has also equally enjoyed. Thank you so much.